If you like this story today, there are lots of others like it on this podcast and also referenced in my new book, which is called What She Said and What I Heard: How One Man Shut Up and Started Listening. It's available everywhere now, wherever books are sold, at your independent bookseller or on Amazon or wherever you'd like to get books, and also in electronic form. And next month, it'll be available as an audiobook, wherever you get those. I hope you'll check it out.
By the time the end of high school rolled around, then I started to become that thing which my parents for my whole life had accused me of being.
What is the sound of one man listening? This is Man Listening, a fresh podcast featuring the stories of strong women who bounce back. Man Listening, because every woman deserves to be heard.
Hi, I'm Stuart Watson, and welcome to Man Listening. Today, Juli Ghazi, entrepreneur, businesswoman, and something of a spiritual mentor to me after she has recovered from a seemingly hopeless disorder. Her resilience now.
Where were you born?
Greenville, South Carolina, in Greenville Memorial Hospital.
So you were born in the hospital. And where were you in the birth order?
First.
So you're the eldest of how many?
I think I'm the first. I'm the first of four, but I did in fact have someone who is an astrologer that seemed to think that there might have been another born before me.
And were you able to ask your...
It was my dad. It would not have been a relationship with my mother. My dad was in fact engaged to a woman named Mary Lou. So I did ask him about it, and he just kind of dismissed it as she didn't know what she was talking about. So I don't know. Maybe there's somebody he doesn't know about.
So then the question becomes, do you trust your dad? Do you trust his judgment?
No, I don't actually. Not that I don't trust his judgment. I don't trust his ability to be truthful. So yeah. So if he did know, I think that he could be capable of taking something like that to the grave with him.
Do you think it was just that he didn't know or didn't remember, or that he was willfully dissembling, as they say?
What is that, willfully dissembling?
He's lying.
Yeah, I could see it of him being, he didn't know, but my parents both came from Greenville back in the day was a pretty small town, so it'd be kind of hard to, or that he was a co-conspirator in, in terminating the pregnancy, which he would never admit to that now, given the fact he is so staunch in his very conservative religious views. So, yeah, I think that he would not be able to admit something like that, given his stance that he's taken on certain issues. So
it is interesting because you never know.
Yeah. So I keep hoping that if, he did know and there is a child that's out there, maybe at some point in time on like Ancestry DNA, it might pop up. Because I actually know a woman who just found her birth mother through Ancestry.
Oh yeah,
DNA.
that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I was adopted, and I've done three different types. Yeah, so I've bumped into a lot of people where that was the case.
Yeah.
That you find out, or you might find out the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you may as well level with people because it's all coming out now.
Nowadays it is, because there's no hiding. I mean, back when adoptions were closed and you thought no one's ever going to release this information, it's now being able to be obtained in other ways, like through DNA testing. It's interesting, yeah.
Now, what kind of astrologer did you go to? What do you call them? They do the whole chart where they take your exact place and time of birth. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah, so
it's
looking
quite
at
elaborate.
It is. And so there were so many things without her knowing me at all that she was on point with. So many details of things that she could not know otherwise. I've done enough fun like fortune telling, palm readings, where it's like such generic information that, but this was stuff that was very keen and very specific, such as she could pinpoint almost to the day, but within about a 48-hour period of when I hit rock bottom in recovery.
Wow.
She could tell that just by looking at where I was and, my wheel of fortune.
Yeah.
Because you have...
Where the various
Yeah, it
Bless
was.
his heart.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting that she got so many things right. So I was like, maybe there is some legitimacy to this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm open. But
Yeah.
so, what kind of little girl were you?
It's hard to look back on when I was a little girl because it's so distorted of what I was told that I was versus what I actually was.
Well, what was the difference?
Well, what I was told that I was raised by two people who had not come into any place of self-awareness when they decided to have a family.
Oh, so you weren't planned.
No, it's not that I wasn't planned. It's just that they were still so trapped in like a 15-year-old mentality, even though they were young, early 20s. They just were emotionally, their maturity level was stunted as if they're teenagers, and they parented in this way that was more of knee-jerk reactions to everything. There was never any type of global awareness or what I like to call parenting.
What do you mean by that? Give me an example. What did that look like?
What it looked like was my mom raged a lot. You could never make mistakes. You couldn't mess up. Everything needed to be exact in order, because if not, then she didn't know how to deal with. And when you've got 4 little girls, then you have to resign yourself. There's a certain level of chaos that is going to ensue because you've got 4 little bodies, and they parent. And my dad was just emotionally unavailable. He checked out by just working all the time, and then not realizing that when he came back into the household, the need to be emotionally present was needed. When you're physically gone from a space, you can't emotionally necessarily connect with people. So getting back into your household, that need to be able to be present and emotionally connect with people, he would just shut himself out with newspapers and headphones and the console TV, playing whatever was on. And then now it's no different, because now it's a 54-inch flat screen TV with Fox News on all the time, and now it's earbuds and an iPad. So he's still in that place of.
I have done that.
Yeah.
I have done that. So guilty as charged, particularly when I was drinking. But I've been accused of doing that with my own kids. So.
And see, the thing is that we all need personal time. We all need, especially if you're coming from like a work environment and then to kind of decompress, and we all need time. It's just that he just is never willing to actually give any time. It was always just, I'm going to go inward when I'm at home, and then I'm going to go away. And so he was never around. So you just had my mom's rage to deal with. But then when but the two of them together, their parenting style was extrapolated from the Old Testament of the Bible. It wasn't about not to get too religious or what have you, but it's not about the New Testament and that being of love and hope. It was the Old Testament of damnation, and you're a bad person is what you always heard all the time. And the message of, well, you weren't good enough for God's love, so you damn sure aren't good enough for my love then, like that kind of messaging. So you just walked around with this sense of, I'm never going to be good enough. If my own parents don't recognize the goodness in me, then who does? So it's very distorted looking back on that, because I was a kid who despite the fact that we moved about 14 times growing up, because my dad was climbing the corporate ladder, I did well in school. I would jump into athletics with whatever new school that I was constantly having to, about every 18 to 24 months, I'm changing schools. So I'm having to make new friends. Like, I'm transitioning all the time. So there was no stability. So when I look back at the fact that, I was, a kid who was academic, I was studious. I really didn't have any friends. So my family was all that I had. Right. And so finally, about the age of 15 or 16, I was just like, you know what? I'm so tired of this message of being bad that I actually then started to be bad. Because it was like, if I'm going to be in so much trouble, for example, I found a letter that I wrote to my parents when I was like 14 or 15 years old. And I was grounded for 3 weeks because I had misplaced, I didn't lose it, I found it, but for a short amount of time, I had misplaced money that was being raised for cheerleading for like summer camp. I'd misplaced it, right? I got grounded for 3 weeks. And so I finally got to this place of, God, if I'm going to be in trouble and spend my entire life being grounded, I'm actually going to do something to make it count. Let's go have fun and make this count, right? And so by the time the end of high school rolled around, then I started to become that thing which my parents for my whole life had accused me of being. And so
what kinds of stuff did you do?
I mean, it was mostly sneaking out, going to parties, drinking a lot, smoking cigarettes, like skipping school. I don't want to say normal teenage stuff, but it was stuff that I wasn't doing up until that point. No, not with boys. Like there was still like a sense of, there still was a sense of being instilled in me, through all that, like, oh my God, God is watching, like that kind of stuff. So it's just like but definitely like, the parties back then, teenagers, you didn't have to have a driver's license and a credit card, and you could rent hotel rooms at like La Quinta Inn. So we would have rager hotel parties. And then as soon as you heard the cops coming, everybody scattered, they had no record of who was there. And, so, it was just stuff like that. We lived in Atlanta. So I would be, we lived in the suburbs, but I would be down in Atlanta. I'd be down in Buckhead and Midpoint and Midtown and Five Points. And I'd be out in all these places that, not that I didn't have any business of being there, but I was just roaming around a big city, all by myself with my friends. And
whose car?
Just whoever. We were a bunch of white kids in middle class suburbs, so every parent bought you a car back then. So we were not, we weren't short on transportation to get away.
And if you go back to are your parents, are they still alive?
They are. They live here in Charlotte.
And how much of this do you think you've kind of resolved, or how much is unresolved?
With my parents or with myself?
Your parents.
Oh, it's not resolved. We don't have a relationship.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and it's not for lack of trying.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's just that at some point in time, you're like, I am 46 years old, and y'all are still acting like the same people I remember when I was 6.
Yeah.
It very much, it's like, how can you not have evolved in the last 40 years? I don't get it. And it just becomes, at some point in time, it's not out of animosity or resentment that you decide, I'm just going to love you from way over here, because your kind of love, it hurts. And I can't bend myself up to be the daughter that you think that I need to be. And I don't understand how it is that I'm not a person that you can't just love. Like, why can't we just be in that place? It's not like that.
We'll get into this, but you strike me as an extraordinarily successful person when I see, like, you've set your mind to certain things, and you also, with this new business, you're evolving. And
you would, yes, I would say that from the outside, you'd be like, wow, and I feel a sense of accomplishment. There's no doubt about it. It, in a lot of ways, it's being a woman in business has a lot of roadblocks and uphill battles that you have to fight, and just people actually taking you seriously, not thinking that you slept your way into whatever opportunity, that, oh wow, you actually have the wherewithal to be able to do what you do. But I also too have, do you ever study the Enneagram?
Yeah, I was
okay,
gonna ask
I'm
you
a
about
7
that.
on the Enneagram. And
what does that mean? Remind me.
So the 7's, our infinite spark is that of joy and possibility. And which I love that about being a 7. And what comes with that is this, I've always had it. It's like I can see blueprints to things in my mind. I'm not exactly sure the route that I'm going to take to get there, but I know that I'm going to land on it. So whether it was moving overseas to study and then subsequently living and staying for, it was like 4.5 years that I was there, starting this restaurant, now starting this new yoga wellness center. So there are things that when I can see it, I'm like, okay, I got it. And then I can just work myself towards that. I don't even know necessarily how I'm going to do it, because I I didn't come from a restaurant family. I'd worked as a hostess at a Chili's when I was in high school. I didn't have restaurant experience to open up a restaurant. I would have been the person in the middle of a recession. I had over 40 banks tell me no because I had no experience. And they're like, there's no way you're going to pull this off. And it's like, yeah, I will. I'll do it.
Is that what happened? What year did you go to them?
Between 2010 and 2011. And then, we were able to, put the money together that then we didn't need any banks, and we opened up in 2012. So yeah. So yeah, I do feel a big sense of accomplishment in that realm.
I got to get into a little of how I built this there.
Yeah.
About it. How'd you get the money?
Well, it's an interesting story because I'll try not to put in all the details, but when I started this project, someone said to me, one of the downsides of being a 7 is that we can also get too many things on our plate, or we can think that the next project, that's going to be the better project, and we'll abandon things. And so someone said to me, Julie, I would just challenge you to be like a stamp with this restaurant, because I'd started working on it when I still had a job.
Be a stamp?
Exactly. And that's what I said. And I was like, what sort of attributes does a stamp have? You don't think about that. And they said, well, a stamp sticks to something until it gets to its destination. Oh. I was like, oh my God, that hit me like velvet gloves right between the eyes. I was like, whoa, that is. So as I started down this process, then, things would start happening. And I was like, I won't quit until I know that the door, the windows, the trap doors are all like bolted shut. And so as things would happen, then I've got these people that are coming on board, and then that person, and then, and so it was just this very strange, like, I don't know what I'm exactly saying to these people that are making them believe in me, but something's happening. So between my business partner and myself, because I put everything I had. By that time, I'd been laid off, and I was like, well, this is going to have to go, because there are no jobs that are out there in this economy right now. So this has to. So I took every penny that I had. My business partner, he went all in, and then we had like 2 people that, also helped us out. So it came down to, and we moved from where we were going to be into a much bigger, into the market location at the 7th Street Market.
Where were you going to be?
In the Duke Energy Tower, the Wells Fargo building. That's the Duke Energy Tower.
Do you think that ended up being a blessing, or?
I do. Yeah, I really do. I know that it would have worked there, but I think that from this being my first endeavor in restaurant operations, to bring it down to a really small size, because we're 250 square feet.
Holy cow.
It's tiny, but we crank out a lot of pizzas. On any given Saturday, we'll be crushing about 400 pizzas a day out of that tiny little space. So we're putting out a lot of pizzas, but it's very
400 pizzas over what period of time?
From 11 to 7. So it's, and that's not all the calzone sandwiches, salads, and everything else. So we put out a lot of product in that tiny little space. So it was a really great opportunity to learn the business in a more contained, less expensive, less overhead. So, yeah. And
I also have to ask you this on that before I forget it.
Yeah.
What would you tell Julie of 2010?
Oh, if your mind is going to be blown at what your life is going to be like in 2019. Because see, I was still drinking then too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, so I had no idea so regardless of the restaurants, or just my relationship with my daughter, my partner, like regardless of all of that, it's like, wow, like I'm blown away at where, and I would just say, hey, it's not going to be easy, but you are going to make it. you're going to come out. You're going to be okay. Just don't give up. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me back up and get us up to there. So you graduated high school in Atlanta, and what happened after you turned 18? What direction did you go right after high school?
Well, my parents moved to Kansas City when I was a senior, and that was like the best thing that ever happened to me at that point in my life.
You stayed behind?
I stayed in Atlanta, and that was magical because it was my last year. was so sick of moving. And by this time then I was like, I started to taste freedom and what that felt like. And I was like, oh my God, this is heaven. So I finished out high school in Atlanta. I started off at University of Georgia. Unfortunately, my first quarter that I was there, I was raped. So that definitely I transferred schools then right after that because I couldn't. The school was not helpful at all. But that was also too before date rape was, part of the vocabulary. I mean, I had been with numerous therapists over the years and had discussed it, but there was no real deep excavation work that happens when you remove, the alcohol and you actually get real with yourself. So, but I didn't seek help for a really long time because when I did go to the school and I went to the counseling office to go say I need help, then it was turned back on me that it was my fault, that I had no business being in this guy's dorm room. And I said, you don't understand. I wasn't drinking that night. We'd gone to a concert and his dorm was right next door where we were just going to go listen to music. I'm an 18-year-old, relatively, naive in the ways of boys because that was not part of my experience. And I'm thinking we're just going to innocently go listen to music. And so you're telling me it's my fault? And so when that happened, then my anxiety, my fears, just were, and that's the point when I actually started drinking alcoholically because it was the only way that I could sleep at night. I would just drink to, pass out. And then when maybe a year-ish later, when I finally told my parents, because remember, they weren't a safe place for me. My dad, emotionally void, my mom just full of rage. So they were not people that I could go and talk to. And then finally it just came out one year at Christmas at my grandparents' house. And my dad did what he did. He just literally got up and walked out of the room and, he wouldn't say anything. There was no reaction. There was no emotion from him. And his inability to be able to say, what does my daughter need right now? What can I do and be here for her? He just walked out of the room. And then my mom got angry and, just added more chaos onto the situation. So it just was there's no safe place for me. It was, you feel really, so I got into a relationship with a guy, and even though it wasn't the best relationship overall to be in, he gave me a sense of protection, because I transferred to a smaller school. He's this very well-known guy on campus, and as long as I was his girlfriend, then nobody could harm me. And so that was how I at that time dealt with it. So I take him out years later, in conversation with therapists, but yeah, it wasn't until I'm telling you, 12-step work, well, everybody needs to do 12-step work. It is no other, which then led me into being able to find different people that could help me with treatment on a different level. A series of events led me to having my daughter, which is, outside of sobriety, the greatest, most amazing gift
What
ever.
were those series of events? You came back here.
I came back here. I moved back to Atlanta because I did not want to be in Charlotte. My parents were living here at the time. I didn't want to be here in Charlotte because it was just such a tired, sleepy little town. And I was 27 by this time and had been living in
It was a different place and you were a different person.
Yeah. So, and I'd never really spent any time here because they moved when I was in college. And so moved to Atlanta, only then 6 months later to be transferred up here.
Working for?
I was working for a direct marketing company doing door-to-door sales. And it was 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And I was making no money at all. But there's just something about being young and dumb and having all that kind of energy. And you don't care that you're living with 5 other people and none of you have any money. And the one day you get off, you're at the pool and just it was just a really fun, crazy time. I started seeing somebody, and then I guess about 6 months into it, I got pregnant. And so I was like, oh, okay. I did not want to be a mom because of the kind of parenting that I received. I was like, I don't know how to do this.
What was the tipping point? How did you decide to keep the child?
Well, I'm very much pro-choice, and and pro-choice being that if a woman wants to keep a baby, if a woman it's not my life to live. I'm pro-choice. I had a hard time thinking about a possible abortion. But I also too knew that I wasn't ready, or I questioned my ability to be a mom. So that was playing way heavy over here of, I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to be what my mom has been. I don't want to be that. And I was getting hard pressed from her dad and his mother on having the abortion. So much so that I was like, y'all need to stop. And so they then would go around me. They'd go to my parents. They would go to his relatives. His relatives would fly in to come and talk to me. And I was just like, can everybody just leave me alone? So I remember sitting, we had like an office in this sunroom area. I say because I ended up moving into the house afterwards. But I remember sitting at this office chair, and it was an afternoon. It was like this. It was just kind of like a really nice, beautiful day. And I was looking out the window, and there was this now granted, I'm not saying this was God. I'm not saying, all I'm doing is just conveying my experience of what happened. But there was this very audible, like, she's going to be okay. Like, it was one of those, like, wait, what? Like, it was so profound. It wasn't my thoughts. It wasn't my intuition. It was something that was like, I don't know what it was. And this feeling of like this warm blanket being put around me. And I just remember sitting there, and I just started crying because I was way too soon to even know that it was a girl. Right. So I was like, and I just remember thinking, you know what? This baby is going to be okay, because I'm going to love the shit out of this baby. And you know what? And that was it. And I remember saying to her dad, I'm not getting the abortion. I'm not doing it. And his mom was furious. And I was just like, I don't care what anybody says. And then I did find out it was a girl. And I was like, okay, this is weird. But you know what it's given me from that moment to even now? She's graduating from high school in like 3.5 weeks. She's headed off to college. And there has been this sense of parenting her from even one of my sponsors said it. She's like, you're not her God. She has her own, she has her own higher power. And I've never parented her from this place of, I'm your higher power. Mm-hmm. It's been this partnership. I'm not her friend, mm-hmm. right? I've never been that kind of mom but it's been this partnership
not your best buddy.
Of how do we explore this world together? Because she has taught me, oh my God, like this kid is an old soul. Mm-hmm. And her perspective and her ideas and just her views on things are just like, wow, like you're so young and you're so deep and so I learned so much from her, and then bringing her into decisions that affect her life. Now, granted, no, I'm not going to let her go out and get on the back of a motorcycle at 6 without a helmet. I mean, let's be practical, but at the same time too, just empowering her to make decisions about her life, and then being able to experience consequences. And I was just talking with someone earlier about this today. The problem with most people is they think consequences are bad, but consequences are good too. And so like really celebrating those good consequences with her when she's made decisions that are like hers, and
what's an example of that?
Okay, one example is she came home and she was furious because her coach at school, who was an older white gentleman, had decided that the girls weren't good enough, smart enough, talented enough, strong enough, whatever, to do some exercise. And my daughter, who is 5'9" and athletic as can be and has played volleyball since she was 8 years old, was like, you're not going to tell me that. And so he kind of doubled down on this sexual discrimination, and she was so angry. So she came back and we talked about it, and I was like, what is bothering you about this? And because somebody second guessed her or didn't give her an opportunity and for the fact that just because she's a girl. And I said, okay. I said, what do you need me to do? And she said, well, I just need you to listen. I said, okay. I said, do you need me to go to the school? Because I think that you and all the other girls should be able to participate in whatever this competition is. And she said, no, I'm going to talk to him. And she marched herself in and just told him in a way that, Serena has this way of, she's not ugly or mean or emotional, but she has this way of telling you something where you're like, oh my God, I've disappointed you and this hurts so bad, because she just has this standard of just morality and ethics and ways of doing things that you're like, it's so beautiful. And so she said, Mom, he just immediately started apologizing and was like, went out then to the whole class and took back everything that he said, and we got to do it, and I won. And I was like, yeah, I want to cry right now thinking about it, just of celebrating the fact that she stood up for herself. She recognized that it was not right. She didn't shrink back and be like, well, I am a girl. She's like, no way. And just...
And good on those adults who can say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do the man thing and double down. I'm going to, I'm going to, you make a good point. You make a compelling case.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
I changed my mind.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got buildings, you've got an entire nation's capital filled with people who cannot do that.
Can't do that. And that is definitely one of the greatest things that recovery has taught me, is just to say, I am wrong and I'm sorry. And how can I make this right? Because, it makes life so much easier, because we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to hurt people.
I need to break in just for a minute in the interest of the continuity of the story. When you hear any story of a person in recovery, you hear what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so I needed to ask Juli, what happened? What was the sort of pivot point or the bottom that led to her recovery?
What was it that led up to the bottom? What was the...
Well, I lost my job in June of 2011. And so when that happened, I lost access to the gym that I would go to. I lost access to financially being able to go to the yoga studio. I had no structure in my life. It was summertime, so all my friends were like, let's meet at the pub for drinks at 2, and let's go to this pool at 1 o'clock on a Monday, and let's go drink. And I started to just spiral, where I had certain rules and parameters around my drinking habits before. And there's no doubt about it. I was drinking alcoholically, like from the time I was, 18 years old at the University of Georgia, but it was full throttle, where it was like I just basically was staying drunk at that point in time.
What were some of the rules? Like, I won't
drink around my daughter. I started drinking around her. I won't drink and drive. I was doing that. I won't drink every day. And it got to the point where, and that lasts like 5 to 6 months. Like I can't go to Total Wine. I was just there last night, and I went to Harris Teeter the night before. So now I'm like conscientious of where I'm shopping my alcohol, because I don't want people to see me in here,
I was just in here.
Right. And they're going to think I'm an alcoholic. So a lot of those rules I was breaking, and it was just every day. And so the bottom hit one weekend. I took my daughter to school on a Friday. I don't know, it's all that, like, you don't know, there's no rational decision. I came back here. We'd had this huge order of wine that had been shipped here for the restaurant, and it was these little like glasses that had been on Shark Tank, single serving wine glasses, and I just started tearing into them. So by like 8:20, I was passed out, and then I would wake up, and then I would just drink back into a blackout again. And by that night, no one had heard from me, and I didn't pick my daughter up from school that day, and someone came to check on me, and then they called. My mom came to get me, took me to their house that night. And she thought that she had hid all the bottles of wine, but they didn't hide them well enough. And so but she did hide all the wine keys. So I went and I was digging stuff out, like with a butter knife, to get the corks out. Right. So the next morning, my mom said she walked in that she thought I was dead, because I had like very little pulse. They called the ambulance, and I got to the hospital, and I was like at a 0.42 blood alcohol content. So it was pretty well up there. And so
that can kill you.
Yeah. And so I stayed in detox, which I was thankful for a medical detox, because that was the most horrific physical experience ever, going through that. And then they put me in a psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. So it was a lot of fun. And it was so interesting though, because of that, so it was like 3 weeks, basically, I was at the hospital. And then I still didn't check into rehab after that. My daughter's the one that saved my life there, because I did drink after I got out of the psychiatric ward. And I did have to go back to the hospital because, 2 drinks weren't enough, like controlled drinking. I was right back to over 4.0 when I went back to the hospital the second time, just like a week later. And my daughter said to me, and my business partner and people have been trying to get me to go to rehab, and I was adamant that I didn't need help. I was just depressed and I was stressed and I needed a vacation. And so it's just amazing how the mind works. But my daughter said to me, and she's in 5th grade, and she said, Mom, I need to talk to you. And we were driving, so I pulled the car over and I turned the engine off, and I was like, what's up, babe? And she's like, I need you to know that if you drink again, I'm not going to feel safe, and I'm going to have to go live with my dad. And I was like, hey, Eastover, can I get that slot in that outpatient program? And checked into rehab the next day. So it was, I've told her, I said, Serena, so many people were trying to tell me, but in that moment, I said, what impacted me the most was you not feeling safe with me. And I remember that feeling of never feeling safe with my parents. And the one thing as a parent that I promised myself is that I would try to do my best is to always be a safe place for you to land. And the thought of not being that, I said, it shattered everything that I needed to believe about myself not being an alcoholic. And that was it. I was in rehab and haven't had a drink since then. So.
And how long has that been?
Coming up on 7 years next month.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Hey, thanks.
Looky there. Why did you stay stopped? How were you able to stay stopped?
Well, it was interesting because when I was in treatment, it was a 4-month program, and one of my addiction doctors, so they had like a great team of counselors and doctors, and it was really interesting information to learn about the science of addiction, which was fascinating. We were required to go to meetings as part of our program, but I remember the addiction doctor sitting there, and he looked me in the eyes, and he was this Indian man that just, like, the weight and the gravity and just the way that he said it with his accent and this, like, and he said, Julie, I'm going to tell you the secret. He said, I don't care how many meetings you go to. He said, I don't care how many times you say your prayers and you beg God to keep you sober. He said, if you don't create a life for yourself that's better in sobriety than what you remember in addiction, you're always going to go back to that memory. He said, you've got to create something that you will not risk losing. And he said, and that's just going to take time. And he said, and that, like, that meant everything to me of, you're right, because there is a nostalgia. You forget all the times of waking up not knowing your car, your dignity, your keys, or any of those things are, you forget all that. And now I'm like, the risk is the stakes are too high, because I've built trust back with people that I thought I had lost it forever. I've, been able to actually have relationships that mean something. I'd never had that before. I mean, my boyfriend terrified me the first time he asked me out, which is when I was still drinking. So it was like 8 or 9 years ago. The first time he asked me out, I was like, I can't go out with him. He's like self-actualized and grounded, and I think he's healthy, and I would destroy him, but having like real relationships with people is like, oh, like I can't, you can't do that when you're in active addiction. You can't do that with yourself. And so I don't want to lose that. I mean, yes, I love my business, and I wouldn't want to lose the business, not because of me, but because it feeds families, and there are people that show up and they put in time and effort, and they can support their kids going to college. They can buy a new car because their old one finally gave out. They can, take a honeymoon, and they like that. I wouldn't want to lose the business for what it provides, not some ego trip of I can't handle failure. But I so that to me is like the real secret of it. And we talk all the time in recovery meetings about, like in step 3, turn my will and my life over to God as I understand her. But no, but the reality is that I don't know what God or the universe or whatever, I don't know what the will is for that. But what I would have to say is that will is not to see me in active addiction and to be hurting and in pain. That's not willful, right? And so if I just don't take a drink today, then I got another chance tomorrow. Not every day is good or perfect, and the pain sucks when it hits because you just want to anesthetize it. But the things that I've been through sober and the things that I know are yet to come, I think that what's been so helpful is that the traction of going through really difficult things in life and then realizing I did it without having to resort to drinking. It's like, okay, it didn't kill me. I fell through the bottom and it didn't kill me.
It sounds like the coolest thing you created is your relationship with your daughter.
Oh my God.
That you are safe.
Oh.
That you are a safe space for her. That you're a launching pad for her to go forth.
It's I wish that I could have this kind of relationship with my mom. And granted, my relationship with Serena is not perfect by any means. We're two people. We're totally imperfect, and which then will create opportunities in relationships for discord. But our ability to be able to talk through things and hear each other and acknowledge each other for what we're feeling and to be able to get through that, I'm just like, yeah, it's just, it's the greatest. It's the greatest.
You're very kind to do this.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate you asking.
And I think there are a lot of people who can benefit from the knowledge that you can take these hits time after time after time, having family of origin that is not supportive, that does not understand you, being raped on a college campus, divorce, isolation, having to make choices about a pregnancy essentially all by yourself, and coming through that, not to mention which, killing yourself with substances and then coming back.
Yeah.
And people need to know. So thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a great blessing.
Juli Ghazi is the owner and founder of Pure Pizza on Central Avenue and in the 7th Street Market, and now is the co-owner of the Kali Yoga Center. Juli, thanks for your time.
Man Listening is a production of Unmediated LLC in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. Allison Andrews at Andrews Creative and Rachel Clapp-Miller are developmental producers. Sally Higgins at Higgins & Owens tries to keep us legal. Our music is A Day at the Park by the group Pictures of the Floating World. Your announcer is Catherine Smith. That's me. Please go to our Patreon page. You'll find us at patreon.com. Look for Man Listening, one word, no spaces. We hope you'll join us by becoming a member. A small investment can raise up the conversation. If you want exclusive member merch, like a t-shirt, we can arrange that too.
A huge thank you and shout out to everyone who has supported Man Listening from the beginning. I have sent anyone who's a member of this on Patreon a free, signed, and personalized copy of my book, and I'd love for you to join us. Thanks so much.
Don't forget to support us at Patreon. We believe one voice can change the conversation. Click the subscribe button, and next week you'll hear.
How do we support and accept someone's poor behavior that's harmful? How do we say, we love you anyway, but you need help?
That's next week on Man Listening. Thanks.